Thanks for joining us on episode 1505 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
Hey, my name's Nick, and I want to invite you to take ownership of your time, talent, and treasures, to invest in yourself, to pour yourself into others, and to steward your influence so that you can leave a lasting impact. Stewarding your faith and your life is essential. And one way to fuel that journey is by tuning into the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend Scott Mader. You should be giving something. And a couple of reasons there of why you should give something and not just say, I'll wait to give till later. First off, generosity shifts your mindset from scarcity to abundance, which is worth its weight in the purest gold. Because if you can start to think in an abundance mindset, it will affect everything about your life and personality and friendships. It's so helpful.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's podcast episode, I interview Nick Garofalo. I asked Nick about why he sees stewardship as more than money and how faith and finance intersect. And Nick also shares how advising can be different and how by taking a faith-based approach, he sees financial success differently. And Nick also talks with you about how generosity is fundamental to financial stewardship. I have a great book that's been out for a while now called Inspired Living. Assemble the puzzle of your calling by mastering your time, your talent, and your treasures. You can find out more about that book over at inspiredlivingbook.com. It'll take you to a page where there's information and you can sign up to get some mailings about it as well as purchase a copy there. I'd love to see you get a copy and share with me how it impacted your world. Nick Garofalo is the founder of Open-Handed Wealth. He wants to help Christians align their life goals and vision with biblical wisdom, transforming stress into clarity and solving the client's pain point. He talks about the intersection of faith, business, and generosity, empowering listeners to find financial peace, give freely, and leave a lasting legacy, one small choice at a time. He's a guy who loves Jesus, his wife, and his kids. He's passionate about helping people solve their money problems and answer their money questions. You can find him on the mountain bike trail, at his church, playing with his kids, or reading a good book. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Oh, thanks for having me, Scott. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. So I talked a little bit in the intro about some of the work you're doing over at Open Hand Wealth and working on sharing things with folks around finances. And of course, that's a topic I find near and dear to my heart as well. But before we talk about some of the work you do, would you talk a little bit more about your journey and what has brought you to this point where this is the work you feel called to do?
Yeah, absolutely. It comes from my own firsthand experience. I know how overwhelming it can be to juggle the demands of running a business and supporting a family and trying to create some financial stability. So my journey really started as the son of a business owner who was struggling himself to find clarity and strategy in the midst of just the chaos of financial decisions and running a business. And I realized watching my dad try to do his best with, very little guidance, that I wanted to devote my life to filling that gap for people, of helping the business owner, the entrepreneur who's going out, like trying to create in the world and trying to do good. But I wanted to help them with strategy, with intentionality and wisdom to apply those frameworks to their decisions and to their business. And for the last 10 years, I've dedicated my time to trying to build the skills to help entrepreneurs. And about a year ago, I finally set out on my own journey as a business owner. So
when you talk about the 10 years of developing the skills, what was some of that journey like in terms of how did it help you figure out that, hey, I want to do this on my own. I want to do this a different way from just working for somebody else or just taking it on as a quote job?
Yeah, my mind goes to two different categories there. There's the practical, kind of the nuts and bolts skills, and then there's all the soft skills. The more, I guess I'd call them more personal, right? So there's nuts and bolts, I think, are the easier ones, right? That's the learning the analytical skills, the how to read and analyze financial statements and vet an investment or plan for taxes or implement a 401k. Those things, those are the hard skills, right? And in a lot of ways, those are really the easier things to master. The personal skills, the soft skills are the ones that I find tricky, because that's when you're dealing with a real person who has feelings and thoughts and fears and embarrassments about their finances or their personal life, and they're inviting someone into it to give advice. It's hard to, as the client, it's hard to not feel scrutinized when someone looks at you're sitting there in the doctor's office. It's hard to not feel uncomfortable. And so I watched that so many times play out in my own father's church. So I worked for him for several years, and then we were acquired, and I was the chief reporting and analytics officer for about 3 different companies in the portfolio, and learning what it's like being on the inside of a family business. And then a short stint I spent at another family business, but I was on the outside of the family, just taught me a lot. Taught me about working with different people and how much trust is a crucial component of that role as an advisor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think what you said there about money is interesting. I work as a coach. It's a little different work than the work you do, but related.
Sure.
And I tell people all the time, it's the math part. That's the easy part. You can Google how to do a budget. You can Google investments. You can Google this sort of thing, and you get lots of data and lots of information. But then how do you implement it? What does it actually mean for your life? What should you do this or should you do that? That's the hard stuff. It's all the very personal decision making that usually freezes people up. Would you agree with that?
I would, and I would agree from my own experience. And I'll tell you something else, Scott, is the experiences I've had where I'm paying for someone to do something for me, like hiring a coach or an advisor. I think that I'm hiring the hard skills. I think I'm hiring a web developer. I think I'm hiring a template creator, some sort of hard, tangible, deliverable asset. And really what I'm getting is someone to push me to implement, right? Like maybe they've got a great template, and I'm sure they do, but I need someone to push me to implement it and then help me tweak it along the way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what you're really hiring.
Yeah, and how to deal with and adjust when things don't happen exactly the way you had it on that piece of paper for the plan. Because like I tell people, when you sit down and write a plan, there's one way that plan goes perfectly. There's an infinite number of ways that something goes wrong.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was Eisenhower, I think, that said plans are useless, but planning is indispensable.
Yeah, plans mean nothing, but planning means everything is the version I've heard. But yeah, it was Eisenhower during the war. You're absolutely right. One of my favorite quotes as well. So talk a little bit. You were also mentioned that you're a person of faith and you have that connection between the work you're doing. Again, this is back to that hard skills, soft skills kind of question that we were just talking about. How do you see your faith journey having played out, and how does that affect how you view the work you do around finance and around business owners and helping them?
Sure. Yeah, I could talk about this for a long time, so feel free to stop me at any point. But I think it was C.S. Lewis that said, I believe in God in the same way I believe in the sun, not just because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. My faith is the most core part of who I am. It's integral to everything about me. Anybody that I've heard it put like this: anybody that can predict their own death and then rise from the grave 3 days later when they said they were going to, I'm going to believe anything they have to say. And so I was born and raised in the church. So definitely that's been very formative for me. But it wasn't until I really was an adult, starting to take ownership of my own faith and really develop my own relationship with the church, with God, with Jesus himself, that I started to realize just what stewardship really is. It's not, when I was a kid, stewardship was the thing that was preached about when the pastor's going to ask for money. Mm-hmm. That was the way
my joke is it means we're starting a building campaign.
Yeah, exactly. It's okay. The stewardship talks. I guess we're gonna be asked to give money. And as a kid, I was like, "Oh, great, let's give. That's great." And I had rose-colored glasses, I guess, for that. But as an adult, I've come to a very different understanding of this, right? Given that my faith is the lens that I see everything through, I've realized that we live in a resource-rich world. God has provided us almost unfathomably limitless resources, and He's asked us to have dominion over them. He's given us dominion, and He's given us the mandate to create. Entrepreneurship is the beautiful blending of those two mandates that God gave us in Genesis. Go take dominion and go create. And so entrepreneurs filled that command with this beautiful integration of creativity and dominion and implementation that I don't know if I really find anywhere else. And so I guess getting back to your original question, I approach my finances the same way that I approach my time management, the same way that I try to approach relationships. And it's asking the question fundamentally, what would the owner of this resource do with it? What would he do with the assets he's given me, whether it's money or whether it's a business or whether it's whatever the resource may be? What would he do? And then I want to go do that. That's it. And bring him honor and bring him glory and bring his kingdom to the world. That's what I'm about.
So one of the things too, I think, as entrepreneurs, adding to that, well, not only are entrepreneurs awfully creators and take dominion, but we're also uniquely positioned to really live out a message of servanthood. I know what I mean by that is, and I'd like your take on it, is I think the most successful businesses, long term at least, are businesses that truly take on that attitude of we're here to serve our clients, we're here to serve our employees, we're here to serve. We're not just here to make money, we're here to actually help people. Short term, sometimes focused on the bottom line, making money seems like it's real successful, but long term, it doesn't seem to play out that way. How have you seen that kind of servant mindset play out in the entrepreneurs you work with?
I don't know if I could say it better than you just did, Scott. The most successful companies that all the experts talk about, that have books written about them and documentaries made about them, the good ones, not the bad documentaries, right? But the good ones, those are all companies that are really devoted to customer service. Because at the end of the day, if you can't have a business without customers. Mm-hmm. So you have to be focused on delivering really good product, really good service. And yeah, I think that's a really beautiful connection you just made there of business as an opportunity for serving with a servant mindset. I think that's great.
Mm-hmm. What do you define as that intersection between faith and finance? You talked earlier about stewardship and how we always label that with finance, but it's more than that. But when you are looking at money, how does that intersect with people's faith, or how do you view that kind of intersection of faith and finance?
Okay, so yeah, it's building on a couple points I made. So God is a generous God. I believe God's an entrepreneurial God in the truest, most holy sense of the word. But also we live in this incredibly resource-rich world where everything is his in the first place. So money is his, right? The cattle on 1,000 hills, the gold in all of the earth, right? It's all his. And our stewardship and our creativity and our uses and creation of new wealth and development of all these great products or services that we can create, all of that is simply either reflecting or iterating on his original creation. I was just listening to something the other day. It was an incredible point I've never really considered, but in Genesis, when God created everything, he said it's good. Now, in the Hebrew, I'm not a scholar, but I always understood that word to mean good in the best, richest sense of the word. But the scholar who was talking said, actually, he could have used perfect. He could have said, oh, God saw what he made and said it was perfect. He didn't. And he thinks, and I agree, one of the reasons for that is that it wasn't done. It was never intended to be, that's it, no more. He's given us these resources to iterate, to get more creative. So the intersection of faith and finances, to me, that is what stewardship is. At its truest sense, it's asking that question, what would the owner of these assets do with them, and then doing it. So where does that play out for me as a person, or for a listener, for anybody just owning a business and running it? It's at the most fundamental sense, it's at least being open to asking that question. and starting to see what you have through a different lens, from a different perspective.
And even changing your vocabulary, because I know for me, I try to not think of, quote, the resources I have, but I literally change the word to these are just the resources I've given to manage.
Absolutely.
Or steward, if you want to use the old fashioned word for it, because because when I start thinking of it as the stuff I have, that's when I start making different decisions. Not always decisions that I think are the most in alignment with what God really is calling me to do. It's harder to write a check to give away money whenever it's my money.
So true. It's so true. It reminds me of a story I'll have to come back and share.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Share.
I've had a real privilege of working with a really sweet couple who are full-time missionaries. And it's not your traditional financial planning advice. The reason that they haven't worked with any other advisors is because most advisors, even faith-based advisors, I think still have a really hard time starting from stewardship first and money next. I think, so working with this couple, there have been multiple times that they've given away a huge amount of their emergency fund, which was never that big to begin with by modern standards. Traditional financial advice says, absolutely, you don't do that. That's we lost our job, rainy day, something goes wrong, fund you don't touch. But God's laid it on their heart to give it away. And Scott, it would bring tears to your eyes if I told you some of the stories of the people that they're seeing up close on the real front lines of ministry. And they have an opportunity to surgically inject God's capital into a really tangible material need and help provide for people. And I told her, I was like, look, guys, I'm not going to tell you that you shouldn't do that. Yes, you should definitely try to rebuild your emergency fund. I'll save back up. But I'm so impressed and so proud of you guys. And I think it just brings God such joy to see that your trust is not in money. It's not. It's just not, because you just gave away your comfort zone right there to meet somebody else's need. It was such a challenge to me, though. It really was.
It's back to what you just said. It's that weird dichotomy that you have between the practical and the faith, or the soft side, or the human side of, in other words, that decision. I don't think either one of us would say that decision is the right decision for everyone to do in every situation.
True.
But does that mean it's not the right decision for somebody? Those aren't the same thing.
But they're not. Well, and again, just it was the difference of this is money we have versus this is just money we're managing.
Right. And feeling truly called. That was what they were being called to do with that money. My guess is that they've never yet had a situation where they've been really left in the lurch after doing that either, that somehow or another it's worked out.
It's always worked out.
Usually with some sort of, I always tell people, I find God a lot of times in the coincidences. And what I mean by that is I do something in faith. I put something out there going, I really don't see how this is going to work, but I truly feel God is calling me to do it. And stuff shows up.
You never missed it, right?
Yeah. And it usually doesn't show up the way I thought it was going to either. It shows up in some sort of weird way that is like, oh, that's what we were doing. Okay, I missed that. I didn't. Turns out I'm not as smart as God.
Yeah, and good thing too, right?
I'm glad God is not as dumb as me. I'll just put it that way. So when you talk about financial advising, that's one of those things that people hear about, and they know this term, there's financial advisors and that. But I think people also think about it as this kind of one uniform, monolithic, everyone has the same approach. It's all the same kind of thing. I can go to anybody that calls themselves a financial advisor and it's all the same. And yet I know, and there's different flavors and different approaches and different mindsets that folks take, as both on a practical level as well as an individual level. Talk a little bit about what advising is, different flavors of it, and then what you do specifically in the approach that you take.
Scott, so I'd start with just a brief history. If you look back in the 60s, 70s, even into the 80s, the financial services landscape looked like mostly insurance. It was mostly life insurance, the early development of whole life policies and things like that. And so if you were a financial advisor, it meant really you were a life insurance salesman. And so your job was that was it, right? Fast forward a couple decades, the complexity of investing and the kind of proliferation of retail investing meant that anybody could buy and sell stocks. Oh, that's awesome. Which ones should I buy? Poof. Now enters the new financial advisor. He is now a stock picker, a stock analyst, a stock advisor, and he will take your money and he will invest it well. And as mutual funds evolved into ETFs, and now we've got super, super cheap, diversified, readily available investments for everybody, that isn't quite as prevalent anymore. It's now evolved more into what I do, which is comprehensive flat fee or fee only financial planning. And what we do as like fee only advisors is we're not just selling you an insurance policy, which I don't even sell policies, by the way. I can advise on them and certainly vet them, but I don't make commissions. I don't sell products. It's great. I'm completely agnostic to what my clients do or buy or invest in. I can manage assets. So if you did come to me like, yeah, I really don't know how to invest my 401k, I can give you advice on what to actually put your money into. I can take custody of certain assets as well and manage them. But like the comprehensive planning model answers not just one or two questions, but it's designed to really incorporate all the different various aspects of somebody's financial life, from disability insurance to budgeting and debt reduction to investments. And obviously taxes is a huge question for most people. Most of us have no clue how taxes work and how to reduce taxes, all the way to estate planning, which is beneficiaries and legacy and who's going to take care of your kids if something happens to you, or get your assets or resources when you pass away. Like all of that is part of the planning process. And it's not just focused on one quote unquote silo of somebody's life. And so kind of the evolution there of also how people charge, right? So back in the day, it was life insurance that was all commissions. Then it was stocks. A lot of that was commissions. Then it was asset management, which is a percent of assets or a fee like that. And then now it's almost more like coaching, where it's like, yeah, I charge $200 a month and I'm your financial coach for everything. And so that's the progression, the history. And I'm in that last category there.
Mm-hmm. When people are thinking about the different questions that they can ask, or when they come to an advisor, what do you see as the kinds of questions that people should be asking that maybe they don't usually come to asking, if that makes sense?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think people are uncomfortable asking this because the question I'm about to share, because it feels very pushy and almost awkward. But in our space, it's not. It's not at all. But you should definitely ask, hey, how are you paid? Mm-hmm. Advisors are required by law to disclose that in paperwork. So it's in there. You're not asking how much did you make last year? You're asking who's paying you. Mm-hmm. And if the answer is anything but you and you alone as the client, then at the very least that they're getting some sort of compensation elsewhere, whether that's a commission or a residual or something. But that that's a really good question to ask, is who's paying you? And then also, where are you registered, or how are you licensed or registered? It takes a little bit of Googling, but basically there's a handful of regulatory bodies, and it's really, helpful to know where people are registered and how they're licensed.
And how are they regulated or licensed?
Yeah.
One of the questions that I've told people to ask before too is, when we're working together, when are you acting as a fiduciary and when are you not acting as a fiduciary, or when are you held to that standard? Because even though that's a weird word and people don't necessarily know what it means, but the fiduciary act of an advisor, there's other go back to your insurance salesman. Insurance is not held to that same standard in terms of what I do as an insurance salesman as when I'm acting as an advisor. So if I wear both of those hats, I need to know when you're wearing what hat.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got a resource on my website that's like questions you should ask your financial advisor. And that's another great one is, what is a fiduciary? Or
Right.
excuse me,
What
are
is
you
it?
a fiduciary?
Mm-hmm.
Because you may be surprised to learn the person you're talking to actually isn't a fiduciary.
Right. And define it for folks that maybe don't know what that word means. When we talk about fiduciary standard, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I love this. It's got biblical overtones as well, and it legal overtones. So a fiduciary is someone who acts in somebody else's best interest. So the best way I could illustrate that is a guardian of your kids. If you're leaving your children to someone, that person is a fiduciary of your children. And so you need to make sure that you trust them and you trust their decision making. And then their job is to put all of their self-interest aside and focus only on what's in your best interest. And advisors like myself, CFP professionals, certainly legal advisors, but others have taken an oath to do that. And I don't think people realize that. It's not quite like the Hippocratic Oath, but it's comparable in the sense that if a client comes to me and says, hey, I'm just curious, I'm interested, I want to learn more, and they're not a good fit for me, I have a duty, an oath I took to say, no, I'm not the right fit for you. And I've done that. I don't think people realize that because it's pretty foreign in the finance space, right? Not to be cynical, but I think most people just assume you're a salesperson, you're just going to tell me to buy something from you. And it's going to be expensive and complicated. I'm not going to understand it. And so I understand why you feel that way. I feel that way. That's why I do it differently. I don't even call myself a financial advisor because it just can bring up very different preconceived notions or expectations for people when they walk into that meeting.
And that idea of, quote, doing something because it's, so I talk about the difference between influence and manipulation at times. And the way I define that is manipulation is when I get you to do something because it's good for me. Influence is when I get you to do something because it's good for you or it's good for both of us. It's a different mindset. And yeah, something else may be better for me, but if I'm influencing you, I'm taking into account that should be best for Nick. Yeah, I may get some benefit too. That's okay, but it's got to be best for Nick.
It's got to be best. And you're absolutely right. And my goodness, like we're so exhausted of being sold to as a society and as people. And so I think there's just a huge skepticism, especially you're a coach, right? So like you probably deal with this, I think, more than the average where, you know, especially, just friends and family, Scott going to try to sell me on his coaching or whatever. We're so pre-charged to, oh no, I don't want to be sold to. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to. Right. And we can really miss out on a lot of benefits.
I describe it to people like this. Have you ever gone into a store and you legit need some help finding something? You're not finding it on the shelf where you thought it was. They've got it at this store, but you're not sure where it is. It's a great big store. You legit need help finding it. And a salesperson walks up and says, hey, can I help you? And our knee-jerk response is, no, just looking.
Just looking. I'm good.
It's like, you legit need their help. You honestly could turn to them and say, where do you find X, Y, and Z? And our shields are so up that we'll immediately say, no, I'm just looking. And then we'll wander around in the store for 25 minutes trying to find something.
Okay, let's go back real quick to the start of our conversation about customer service. Where do you find those people to be the most friendly and helpful? Name a store.
The customer folks?
Yeah.
The service saying, folks?
Yeah. Can I help you find something? When you hear that, where does it take you to? Oh yeah, to this place, because I know that they have great customer service.
Honestly, for me, and this is a bit of a personal answer, it's actually a grocery chain that we have here in South Texas called HEB, which is a family-owned and operated business. It's still not publicly traded to this day. It's still owned by the same Butt family that owned it generations ago. It's like down to the grandson or great grandson now, and they legit try to train that. Other examples, of course, is Chick-fil-A. That's a big one.
Thinking of Home Depot.
I haven't. It depends on the store. Some Home Depots, I get that. Some Home Depots, it doesn't feel that way. It's more like you're looking around going, I can't find anyone to help me. And I think a lot of that has to do with the manager and how they train up their people too.
Sure. Yeah. But yeah, again, going back to your overarching point is like, that person they're not trying to manipulate you, right?
No.
They're not trying to coerce you. They're there to help you. And I think
but our instinct is if I ask for help somehow or another, I'm going to get taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Which is a really sad thing, honestly. Let's talk a little bit about generosity and giving. You told that great story earlier of those folks that have been called to to give away parts of their emergency fund at different times. How do you approach generosity when you're talking to people about financial planning and planning for your future and balancing those ideas of being a generous person versus taking care of what you need and taking care of financial planning?
So it is a balance. A couple thoughts come to my mind. First is everybody should have a financial finish line. And most of us have no idea what it is. But we can create one. We should have one. And it's the goal of both income and accumulation. We should have really two finish lines, depending on how you're measuring them. But ultimately, it's just an enough goal. And I'm pretty conservative on that, actually. And it might not make me many friends, but I actually think that we should be pretty average in terms of income level and pretty sufficient in terms of wealth accumulation. And everything above that, we get to give. And so based on where you are, if you can imagine the 2x2 matrix, where you got 4 boxes, the bottom axis is income, and then the vertical axis is wealth. And so the closest to the X on the axis there is you're early in your wealth accumulation and you're early in your career journey of income. So you really could use some more income, and you certainly could use some more wealth before you'll reach your financial finish line. So you should be saving aggressively, and you should also be giving some. The sum number, SOME, that sum can vary, right? For some people, it might be 0 for now. And for many of us, it might be, we're probably all accustomed to that 10% tithe concept. I don't know if that's right for everyone at every stage. It's depending on your context, and it's ultimately between you and the Lord to figure that one out. But you should be giving something. And a couple of reasons there of why you should give something and not just say, I'll wait to give till later. Okay, first off, generosity shifts your mindset from scarcity to abundance, which is worth its weight in the purest gold. Because if you can start to think in an abundance mindset, it will affect everything about your life and personality and friendships. It's so healthy. It's so good for you. So give money away just because it's good for you. Okay. Actually, I have a funny kind of side story about that, about how giving is almost as healthy for you as not smoking is, or like going for a 20-minute walk every day. And it's not just fluff. It's actually like a Harvard study that was done. Like, it really is physically healthy for you to give. Okay. But it also reinforces the idea that wealth isn't just about accumulation, and that you're receiving to give, right? Paul talks about that. Okay. But then the other 3 boxes in that matrix are, you've got plenty of income, but not enough wealth, or you have plenty of wealth and not a whole lot of income, or you have plenty of both, right? Plenty of income, plenty of wealth. And based on where you fall, you're either giving some and saving some, you're giving a lot and saving none, or you're just giving a ton and saving nothing. But based on where you fall, whether you're past your finish line, it will inform the amount you can give away. And man, it frees people up. I love helping clients set like giving targets. Mm-hmm. We have saving targets, right? 10, 15, 20, 25%, 401k match, all the good stuff. But what about a giving target? What about, I want to give $1 million away before I'm 40? Or I want to give away consistently 15% or 20% of my income. Or I want to, golly, I knew this guy one time. He was almost a reverse tither, where he was living on 10% of his income. Now, this guy was making quite a phenomenal income, mm-hmm. but he was living on a fraction of it and just giving the rest away. So just a handful of ideas there.
Yeah, I've had one of those clients as well that made an insane income and had done it for a number of years. And I always use it. He was interesting in that there were times we had a conversation one time about, do I continue to charter flights when I want to go somewhere, or do I buy a plane and hire a pilot? And people are like, oh my God, that's insane. And it's this guy made the kinds of money where everyone that he knew, they all owned their planes and had a pilot. That was normal. It was a small fraction of his money to do that. He actually decided not to do that because, in part, by chartering flights, it let him save more money, which allowed him to give more money. And he was the same sort of guy who'd written very large checks to various charities, usually without ever anyone ever knowing that he was doing it, but he did it because that's what he felt called to do. But it is interesting when you're talking to somebody with those kinds of numbers and realizing, oh wait, you can live on a very small amount and still do things that most of us don't get to do because you make such a large amount of money.
Yeah. And that's why so much of these numbers are relative.
Right.
They really are. For some people, the finish line, the financial finish line is going to look different. But I do like to challenge people to think, aggressive feels the wrong word, but just to think a little differently. Mm-hmm. That the Parkinson's law dictates that demand expands to meet supply.
Right.
And that if you cut your budget, your brain will get creative on ways to fit into a smaller budget. It just will. You'll find places to save money you didn't know you had it. Mm-hmm. And so
and that's one of the reasons that I think we're encouraged to give from first fruits. In other words, give before you spend, not after.
Yeah, that kind of gamifies it too.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever studied like game theory and economics, but when you turn something into a challenge that you're trying to solve, it's just more interesting to the brain, and you start finding creative ways to make it work.
Yeah. That's like the no spend months where I'm not going to spend any money in February. It's okay. How are you going to do that? You got to get creative to be able to do that, but you can do it. Is there anything else about the work you do or that you're doing that you'd like to share before I ask you a few questions that I ask all of my guests?
Scott, I think just one thing I'd want to add real quick is that going back to our conversation about business owners, if you own a business and it's profitable, I just want to encourage those listening. God has entrusted you with an incredible resource, and it's not by mistake. It's not by accident. And if you don't have a team of advisors, or at least, depending on your size, at least one good advisor that's giving you an outside perspective on that, there may be incredible blessings that you're missing out on because you're the only one who's trying to make all those decisions alone. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that financial stewardship and financial responsibility is about so much more than just the numbers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've talked a lot about stewardship, and you've used that word a lot, and that's one of my favorite words. But I always like to ask folks to actually, for you, what does the word stewardship actually mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. Stewardship has come to mean that the pressure's off, because it's not all up to me. That when I'm really at my best and I'm really thinking clearly about my life and my business and my family and my work and our future, it's not a problem I need to solve. It's a journey through which I need a very wise and trustworthy guide in my Heavenly Father. And it's a co-laboring. I never saw stewardship like that. Like I said, it was just the topic for Giving Sunday. Mm-hmm. But seeing that God wants my business to do well. He really does. He really cares. He wants me to help people through my business. And when I see it like that, man, like the pressure just melts away. Oh, we're in it together. Mm-hmm. I'm not like that every day, but on good days, when I don't want to paint a picture that I wake up in the morning and it's just sunshine and roses. It's not, but that's what it really, at its core, that's what stewardship really means to me.
Right. But I think also that's why you talked earlier about God saying created and it is good, but not saying it's perfect, and talking about the generosity and how that helps change our heart. I think all of this is related to that same concept, which is we are imperfect beings, but we're called to journey towards perfection. That doesn't mean that we've arrived. It doesn't mean every day is the perfect day, because I don't know about you, but I don't have perfect days every day. Sure. But I won't speak for anyone else, but I sure don't. So this is my favorite question that I like to ask everybody. Imagine for a moment that I could invent this magic machine. And with this machine, I was able to pluck you from where you are today and transport you into the future, maybe 150, maybe 250 years. And through the power of this machine, you were able to look back and see your entire life, see all of the connections, all of the ripples, all of the impacts you've left behind. What impact do you hope you've left in the world?
Wow, what a cool question. first, I actually believe with all my heart that's what heaven will include. That life in the kingdom someday that'll be a part of it. And hearing the stories of people we've impacted. So I think at some point I will actually we all will get to see the answer to that question. If I was, hoping and dreaming today, two prayers I prayed for a long time, Scott. The first is right out of Proverbs. I think it's either chapter 30 or 31 where he says, give me neither poverty nor riches, but feed me with the food that's needful for me. Don't give me more than I need, lest I be full and curse you, or less than I need, lest I steal and dishonor the name of my God. And then the second prayer, similar, is God, keep me from bearing fruit that my branches are not yet strong enough to hold. I think a lot of people, one of my favorite authors talks about this a lot too, a lot of men who do well and do good work and are honorable and trustworthy are given kingdom, right? Quote unquote, like given responsibility and authority and presence and platform much too early. And it becomes their ruin in some way or another. And so my prayer is that that fruit that will be produced in my life will have a similar effect on those that enjoy it, right? And I think that this is interesting. I think it's, again, going back to it's not all up to me, the pressure's off, that can turn into patience, or that can develop patience. And that patience, I'm thinking of a couple of New Testament references here, like Peter and Paul's letters, but where they talk about character and patience and proven hope and all these things. That process, I hope that my impact on other people is a desire to, how can I say this? Live out their life in the same way, right? Where it's not all about fame and fortune and whatever the world wants to throw at us, but it's about the slow and the steady journey of walking patiently with God and subjecting ourselves to his process and his time.
Yeah, sad. So what's on the roadmap? What's coming next for you as you continue on your journey?
With 4 kids, I can only see about a week into the future. But
with 4 kids, if you can see a week into the future, I'm impressed.
Yeah, so we've got a full busy house of young kids. But yeah, professionally, I'm focused on expanding my business. I want to help as many people as I can. I want to create educational resources. I hope to inspire other people to steward better. I hope to be an encouragement to people. I hope more than anything to be a disarming reassurance to people that they're not nearly as bad off as they feel like they are. But yeah, I look forward to exploring ways to collaborate with other business owners and help people build legacies of faith and generosity and purpose. So the journey is, Lord willing, far from over for me, and I'm excited for what's ahead.
Absolutely. So you can find out more about Nick over on his website at openhandedwealth.com. Of course, I'll have a link to that over in the show notes as well. Nick, anything else you'd like to share with the listener?
If this has been interesting to you, and if you'd like to get to know me or schedule a call, you can certainly visit my website. And strategy sessions are free. I just love to meet people and find any way that I might be able to help or add value. Feel free to head over there and reach out. I'd love to meet you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you enjoyed this episode, please do us a favor. Go over to inspiredstewardship.com/iTunes rate, all one word, iTunes rate. It'll take you through how to leave a rating and review and how to make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that you can get every episode as it comes out in your feed. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.